Oh, yes, we're rolling. Okay,
Right.
grand. So yes, so Janice, whenever you want, just go ahead and announce yourself and who you are, etc., and then your story.
My name is Janice White. I am the daughter of Frank Oakley, who was started off with course 14 at Falcon Field. He unfortunately caught valley fever and was put back, and he graduated with course 15 at Falcon Field in 1943. He travelled out to America on on MS Andes, a liner. He went from Gourock in Scotland over to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then on to Moncton in Canada. It was December. He was 18 years old, so it was quite an adventure for him. He had never expected to become a pilot. He was just a young lad in Northumberland, very humble. He had not been able to go to grammar school because his mother could not afford the uniform and the books that he needed. So he went into the RAF after he had worked for a few years as a clerk in the ship yard in Blyth, because they built quite a lot of ships in the northeast at that time. And he went into the RAF. He'd been in the younger version of the RAF, the volunteers, before that. He expected to become an air gunner because he was actually quite short. So he expected to be inserted into the rear gun of a bomber. He never ever expected to be a pilot, but he was actually quite bright. So the RAF classed him as fit to become a pilot, and off he went. He was sent off to Arizona to learn to be a pilot, like thousands of others at that time. So he went across the Atlantic in December. He landed in Halifax, Nova Scotia. There was very, very thick snow there when he arrived. I think it was Christmas Day when they arrived in Nova Scotia. They spent a few days in Moncton before they were allocated to wherever they were going in the States. He was allocated to Falcon Field in Mesa, Arizona. So he then set off on a train journey across America, which took several days. And it was fascinating because he started off it was fascinating because he started off in thick snow, and then as he went further south, the temperature got hotter and hotter and hotter, and it was a big adventure being on a train in America. He landed in Phoenix. The barracks weren't quite ready for them at that time, so he went to a hotel called El Portal in Mesa. He spent a few weeks there. They had to get up very early to be bussed out to the airfield, and then bussed home again at night. But they were very lucky because if they appeared in their uniform, the locals just stopped and gave them lifts and were very, very friendly to them. Now, America to them was quite different from the UK at that time, because this was a land of sunshine and plenty. He records that they had everything they could want to eat. There was plenty of meat, bacon, eggs, everything you wanted and fruit, everything you wanted for breakfast and other meals, other meals. It was quite different from conditions at home. But whenever I read anybody's accounts of their time in Arizona, I'm always aware of a tension, because there they were, they had this beautiful weather, they had plenty of food, but conditions at home were quite different. There was food rationing, food shortages, at night time they couldn't put the lights on, and of course the enemy were bombing them all the time. Plus a lot of their family and friends were involved in other areas of the war, and bad news could reach them at any time. So Dad could talk about a banana split. He gave all the ingredients of a banana split, which you could not get in the UK at that time. But they all seem to be slightly reluctant to go totally overboard about this lovely time that they're having there, because of the conditions that they know that their family are experiencing at home. Now, these were young lads. A lot of them were just very ordinary lads like my father, but it was unusual just to leave the ground in those days. And a lot of them, the vast majority, couldn't even drive a car. And here were these young lads being allowed to learn to fly these state-of-the-art flying machines. It was a great adventure for them, but they were putting their lives on the line. They had to come back to the UK and fight for their country. And they had to work hard while they were in America, because if they didn't, they were soon put off the course and allocated elsewhere. They couldn't stay at Falcon Field if they didn't make the grade at any time. So, but there were lots of opportunities, and of course they had to make use of them. So Dad went across to Hollywood, because that was the great attraction at the time. And he also went to the Grand Canyon, because of course that was quite nearby. He hitched to the Grand Canyon. And because he had to stay behind to join with course 15, the UK contingent didn't arrive till much later, so he made friends with some of the Americans, and he was very friendly with another guy called Les Brown. His family came from near San Francisco, and they very generously gave Les and my dad air tickets, which again was an adventure, to fly out to San Francisco and spend some time on a ranch nearby. And there are photographs of my father on the ranch with Les Brown's wife and wee daughter. And I very often wondered why Dad never made contact with Les Brown later on. But we learned later that Les had had a very distinguished flying career after he graduated. But he was killed in a horrific flying accident in the 1950s. And so he just wasn't there anymore. And that happened to a lot of people. They lost their friends, but just had to get on with it. Now, my encounters with Dad's life there started a way back. When we were children, I remember a black tin trunk in the box room of our childhood home, and there was a big album in there with an aircraft on the front and lots of photographs inside of Dad and the RAF. And they came out from time to time, and there were photographs of Dad at Falcon Field. Plus there was a collection of postcards which Dad had collected while he was out there. He grabbed every postcard that he could find to bring back his memories, and there was one of El Paso, and I was fascinated by the El Paso for some reason, I don't know why. And that was my experience of Dad in America. We didn't talk too much about it, as I remember, because when you're a child, you're not really interested in what your parents have done. You're too busy occupied with your own life. So we didn't talk much about it until on my wedding day, my aunt, Dad's sister, arrived with a letter addressed to Dad at his old home address. And I discovered just recently that it was only posted 4 days before our wedding. And it was a letter from the Falcon Field Association saying that they were setting up the association and there was to be a first reunion in London about 10 days later. So when we went away on honeymoon, Mum and Dad had a frantic time trying to arrange a trip to London to meet these people. They were away there when we came back from honeymoon. And when they eventually came home, they were absolutely delighted to have met so many people that they had never expected to meet again. Dad met some, colleagues that he'd been in America with. And Mum too met people that she'd heard about but had never met before. And so the next year there was to be a very big reunion at Falcon Field, and they went out there and Dad met his instructor, Bill Erbig. It was a very emotional reunion for them, and Mum and Dad were thrilled after that, and thereafter for the rest of their lives they enjoyed going to reunions in this country. Sometimes they were big reunions, sometimes they particularly enjoyed the smaller reunions of just the people on the course. And after my mother died and Dad became too frail to travel on his own, my husband and I took him to a reunion in Stratford-on-Avon and met some of the people there, and there was a great spirit amongst them, wonderful spirit, and they made us feel very welcome. So Dad, for the rest of his life, was really enjoyed meeting with the Falcon Field people. And then after Dad died, we rediscovered the album, the memorabilia, everything that he still had from Falcon Field. Plus, we discovered the letters that Dad had written to my mum from Arizona. They weren't married then. Dad was desperate not to lose her. He'd fallen in love with her and he didn't want to lose her to anybody else. So he wrote lots of letters to them. Now, my brother and I weren't really keen to pry into what was a private communication between him and Mum, but my husband was absolutely intrigued by these, and he transcribed them onto the computer and ended up writing a book about it. And he's done a lot of research about all the film stars that he met in Hollywood and all the routes that he took through America. And eventually we went out to Falcon Field ourselves. We fell in love with Arizona. We had a trip in a Stearman, which was one of the most emotional experiences of my life, because when Alistair went out, they taxied straight out from the hangar and went straight up. When I went out, we had to wait, because it's quite a busy airfield now, and we had to wait until we got clearance, and I heard in the headphones, Stearman clear for takeoff. We taxied, the engine revved up, we taxied out. It was the most emotional experience of my life. The same aircraft, the same runway, and up we went and did a circuit of the airfield. It was wonderful. And we've also, since then, we've been twice to the memorial service in the graveyard, where 23 cadets and 2 instructors are buried, who unfortunately did not survive their training out there. We've been twice to the service that they have, that the Americans very kindly still have out there for the people that were there, and we just love it.
What other memories do you remember from your father that he said that he did when he was there?
Well, they had a swimming pool, which was donated by some of the film stars who had who donated money to the field, and he enjoyed swimming out there. He also enjoyed the hospitality of the American people, because the boys only had to appear in their RAF uniforms, and people would stop and give them lifts and take them places, and they took them into their homes, and they entertained them. There was the daughters, I've forgotten, but there was a place in Phoenix, something like that. They went there. They could get a bed for the night there. They explored Phoenix. There are photographs of him at the park in Phoenix. The food, of course, was just something they could not experience in the UK at that time. There was everything there. He didn't actually say too much about that in his letters. He was possibly a bit embarrassed, because he knew that people back home could not enjoy all that. But he did send a description of this, the ice cream, the sundae that they had with banana split. Yes, he listed all the ingredients, and my mother, it must have been torture for somebody to read that when they got the experience, when they read that back home. They also went to they hitched up to the Grand Canyon, and again they were lucky. They got lifts. And they explored the Grand Canyon. They went to the hotel there, which I've forgotten the name of. What was the name of the hotel?
I don't remember the name of the hotel. The
At
one
the
at
Grand
the Grand
Canyon.
Canyon.
They went to what's it called? The most famous hotel at the Grand Canyon.
No, I don't remember what it's
Yes,
called either.
I can't remember.
Did he ever mention anything about driving a car?
No, he couldn't drive. He couldn't drive. Many of them could not drive at that time because it just wasn't. I mean, many of them were ordinary people and they just didn't have cars in this country at that time. So I believe that one of the instructors actually bought a car and took it out to the airfield so that they could practice driving because it was just unknown to quite a lot of them. I mean, some of them were very ordinary people. The RAF and the wartime gave them opportunities that they wouldn't have had when they were, if there hadn't been a war, to be quite honest. They had opportunities to travel and to experience things that they wouldn't have seen normally. So
Did your dad? Go ahead. Sorry.
El Tovar was the yes,
Still
yes. It's still there. We've been there. Yes, yes.
Did your dad fly after he left?
Yes. After he left, to his great surprise, he was eventually selected to fly Spitfire. And I think when we met some of his comrades later on at the reunion that we took him to, they were actually very jealous of him getting to fly a Spitfire because that was the creme de la creme at that time. And he went on to fly. He did some sorties across to the continent and he was trained to dive bomb rocket launch sites in Holland, which was quite a tricky task at that time. So, and flying a Spitfire, I mean, that was the creme de la creme. So a lot of his former comrades were quite jealous of that. Yeah.
Did he, once he was out of the RAF, did he ever fly again?
Well, he flew across to America and he flew he flew to Jersey, I think, for holidays, but he never flew.
Not as a pilot.
Not as a pilot, no.
He flew on Concorde.
He did fly on Concorde. Now, how did that come about?
We won a ticket.
We won a ticket. We won a ticket, and Alistair had been on Concorde anyway, so we decided to give it to Dad, and he flew down to London, went out on the Concorde, had that experience, and came back again. He had to do it on his own because there was only one ticket, but yes, he did fly on the Concorde. That was something quite different. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
that's very exciting.
Yes. And I remember he took us, my brother and me, he took us, you know, there were Battle of Britain days in the old RAF fields after the war, and he did take us up in a small aircraft once.
How old were you?
Oh, I was just a teenager. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
See, it's excellent.
Yes.
Okay, so what is she missed, Alistair?
Missed a few things.
What?
We've actually
The swimming pool that she mentioned, it was actually donated by 20th Century Fox.
Oh, interesting. I never knew it was
Yeah, no,
donated.
the
That's no
reason-
one said that.
The reason they donated was that they made a film. 20th Century Fox made a film there, Thunderbirds, Soldiers of the Air,
Oh, the one you were telling me
Yes.
about. Uh-huh.
and they used the cadets as extras.
You
got
wanted
to
to share.
Look at your notes.
Yeah, I did make some notes. I haven't got my glasses though.
quick question for you: is the mic directly by your necklace? Is it rubbing against your necklace, or is that a bit smaller? Oh, no,
It's next down there.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Right.
I'm gonna take
That's
notes on
attention.
my phone 'cause I forgot my.
Oh, forgot your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Dad's legacy for us, after the war, Dad became the estate clerk to the 12th Earl of Haddington in Scotland. And his legacy to us was, well, I've got memories of a good, cosy, comfortable childhood. And we were both...
We've got to cut because of the dustman.
Yes.
It's the dustman.
Forgotten where I
So we
was.
quickly do a bit before we get... So redo that bit that you just did, Janice, about what your dad did.
In childhood.
In childhood, yeah. Well, Dad became estate clerk to the Earl of Haddington, and we moved to the borders, the Scottish borders. And I think that all that his experience influenced how he brought up his children. We have memories of a very cosy, comfortable childhood life, and both my brother and I were encouraged to make the best of our education and take it as far as we wanted. We were encouraged to be all that we could be. Gerald eventually went into the RAF himself and served as a radar technician. I went to the University of St Andrews and to the University of Strathclyde. And as a female growing up in the 50s and the 60s, I was encouraged to be everything that I could be. I wasn't held back by anything, any considerations. So we were both encouraged to do the best that we could. And we were both taught to drive even before the age of 17, because we lived in a private estate and we could drive on the private drives there. So I think Dad's experience did influence how he brought us up.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we're going to pick up when we can
Yeah.
about how he influenced you.
We were brought up, we were encouraged to be everything that we could be. Gerald my brother went into the Royal Air Force. I went to the University of St Andrews and to the University of Strathclyde, and I became a librarian. And growing up in the 1950s and the 1960s, I was encouraged to be everything that I could be. I wasn't held back by my gender or anything. And I think that was influenced by my dad's experiences, and we were encouraged to go out to the world and be all that we could be. We weren't encouraged to stay at home and stick around. We were encouraged to do everything that we could be, and we were both taught to drive even before the age of 17, because we had a private estate to practice on, and that was a great thing as well. And why do we remember them? Well, I think in any conflict, all the major battles and major heroes are documented, but I believe that there are many other little episodes which make up the patchwork of the whole story, and I believe that it's very important to remember these also, because I've realised that not a lot of people know that all these guys went out to America, to Arizona and other places in America to learn to fly, because they couldn't get the air hours here because the enemy were coming over and bombing them all the time. So, hello there. So I think it's important to remember them. And many cadets came from ordinary backgrounds. It was unusual to actually leave the ground at that time, and all these guys, these ordinary guys, were getting to learn to fly in some of the most sophisticated state-of-the-art flying machines, and all the time putting their lives on the line for their country. And they were an exceptional generation, and I believe in the saying, they deserve the comment, they shall rise on wings like eagles, and I believe that's what they did.
Thank you so much. Just one other really thing. Now, if you were giving a message because you can't attend Falcon Field, what's your message?
I would like to thank the Americans for the hospitality that they gave to my father. I would like to thank them for the wonderful experience that they had. They came from a very dark country that was being bombed. They went in Arizona to a land of sunshine and plenty, and despite the fact of the war, they did have a good experience, although they were always aware at the time of what was going on at home, and that life was not like that for the people that they had left behind. I feel that they're always holding back in their accounts of what they've done. They're always holding back because they know the people at home were not having the same experience. And yeah, they were a wonderful generation.
Perfect. Thank you. Janice, thank you very much.
Right.
I'll
Thank
give
you.
you a big